Welcome to the St. Michael Music as Discipleship Saturday podcast. My name is Ellen Templin, and I am your host. Each Saturday, a member from the St. Michael Adult Choir will share how a hymn or choir anthem has deepened their Christian faith. Today, I'm joined by David Waddington, who has chosen a choral selection from Handel's Messiah called "Since by Man Came Death."
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I want to talk today about a section from the Messiah, the great oratorio written by George Frederick Handel. The piece is in three sections. The first is the Nativity, the second is the Passion, the third is the promise of redemption, culminating with judgment, resurrection, and the final victory over sin and death. The first chorus of the third section is taken from Job and Paul's letter. The air for the soprano begins, "I know my Redeemer liveth," and ends, "For now the Christ is risen from the dead." It's followed by the short dramatic chorus that redefines the situation when no uncertainty, both in word and music. Only now man is drawn into the equation. Since by man came death, a slow and mournful passage. By man came also the resurrection of the dead, joyful and declarative. And it gets slow and mournful again. For as in Adam all die. This restatement makes it universal. And even so in Christ shall all be made alive, vigorous and triumphant. Christ has died, Christ is risen. That's the statement. A bit about me. I was born with a little-known incurable genetic disease called polycystic kidney disease. It began affecting me in the mid-90s when my blood pressure shot through the roof and one of many cysts began bleeding. That was when they took out my left kidney. Prior to the surgery, I went in for a second opinion. The doctor said in a raised voice, "Don't you know you have a fatal, incurable disease?" I was shocked. I hadn't thought in those abrupt terms. Life returned to a sense of normalcy until several years later, when a severe pain sent me to the ER. On release, I was told to prepare for inevitable dialysis. Did I prepare? Hell no. I responded by not going back to the doctor for a year. In stubborn denial I was. Dialysis was a dark cloud that I knew I could just ignore. A year later, it all hit the fan. I collapsed with internal bleeding, spent 2 days in the ICU. Reality began sinking in. After a year of fighting, my doctor told me I'd fought a long, hard fight, but the fight was over. My options were to begin dialysis or wait for the inevitable collapse from kidney failure. I remember the dread, lying on the bed as the nurse threaded the long needles into my vein and hooked me up to the machine that would now be keeping me alive. After a year of dialysis, I embarked on the path to transplant. Once you're in the program, you go through intense physical examinations. An MRI revealed a spot of cancer on my remaining kidney, so the kidney was removed. It was the size of a basketball, weighed 8 pounds. A normal kidney is the size of a fist. Now, with no kidneys, the darkest truths began to hit home. I was at the end of my natural life. I was at the end of my string. I was living on borrowed time by the grace of a machine. And then 12 years ago, the phone rang, 3 a.m., Monday morning. It was Bettina calling from All Saints Hospital in Fort Worth. "Good morning," she said. "I have a kidney for you." I'd only been on the list for a year. There had to be a catch, and there was. The kidney was considered high risk. To allow me to make the decision, I learned several details that are not usually shared. The donor was a young man who died in a motorcycle accident and had a history of intravenous drug use. He was clean now, had been for a number of years. The young man had turned his life around, gotten married, and had a young son who was now fatherless. The threat of drug use had caused others to turn down the kidney. I accepted. I remember several things about my recovery after the surgery. First was a strong sense of guilt that I was alive because another man had died. Thoughts of his wife and son brought tears. Still do. The good folks in the prayer ministry at every service have shared my prayers for them on every anniversary of my transplant. And there was a snippet of music that just kept running through my thoughts, an earworm. It was so familiar. It stayed with me, wouldn't go away. While recovering at home, I finally figured out it was. It was Handel. It was from the Messiah. Since by man came death, by man came also the resurrection of the dead. For as in Adam all die, even so in Christ shall all be made alive. The words felt so true. I'm not so vain as to think that the young man died for me, that it was anything other than a pattern of coincidence. Death was real for him. For me, death was avoided by the miracles of modern medicine and modern technology. But the greater truth, the fact that I am writing this podcast nearly 12 years later, is the foundation of a deeper sense of the great blessing that is life, that is love. Several weeks into my recovery, I decided I wanted to go to church. "Are you sure?" asked my wife. "You're supposed to stay home for another week." "Yes," I said. "It's not like I'm going to sing in the loft. We'll sit in the congregation, and then we'll come right home." So we went. It so happened that the anthem for the day was "Since by man came death." I was blown away. It was the chorus from the resurrection section of the Messiah that had been ringing in my ears as I lay in recovery after my transplant. And here I was in church, listening to it being sung by my choir. Tears streamed down my cheeks as all my emotions were released. Of course, I had no idea that it would be sung. I have to believe it was a coincidence, but it's a staggering and amazingly mysterious coincidence. And that was 12 years ago. And every day I walk with that young man, his wife, and his young son. Every day I walk in this new life. Every day is another blessing. Even so in Christ shall all be made alive. Thank you.
Please join us tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. for our live webcast service from St. Michael and All Angels Episcopal Church, where we will sing the selection as part of the service. You can tune in at www.stmichael.org. That's www.saintmichael.org, or on Facebook at /SMAA Dallas.